Hey, what's going on guys? Welcome to this video where I'll be sharing a few film photographers that shoot on black and white film, which might help inspire you in your own work or perhaps expose you to some photographers which you previously haven't come across. As much as I love color photography, there's something so special to black and white photos, and hopefully by the end of this video you might be able to see why that is. Now you obviously don't need to know who these photographers are in order to be a photographer, but as I always mention, I think it's important to be aware of the artists that have come before and discover why their work's been respected over time. So throughout this video I'll be talking about Eugene Richards, Gordon Parks, and Dennis Stock, outlining their background, breaking some of their projects down, and sharing what I enjoy about their work. It's obviously not a definitive list, as there are thousands of photographers I could have picked, but these are just a few I'm currently interested in. So if you do enjoy this video, then please consider subscribing, and if there's any photographers you would like me to cover in a future video, then feel free to let me know down in the comments below. So with that said, let's jump into our first photographer, which is Eugene Richards. So Eugene Richards is an American-born documentary photojournalist, often documenting social injustices in small-town America. A former member of Magnum Photos, he's published over 17 books and put out a few short films over the years, often dealing with themes like drug use, crime, racism, and life and death. The first project I'm going to be focusing on is Dorchester Days, which first came out in 1978, and it documents Richards' hometown, Dorchester, in Massachusetts. After spending several years away living in Arkansas, he returned to his hometown, noticing how radically different it become since he'd left. From the increasing crime rate, drug abuse, and the influx of different cultures, it was now a completely different place to what he previously knew. As an observational photojournalist, he saw this as an opportunity to explore an aspect of small-town America and the issues that are underneath that title. This was the first project that introduced me to Richards' work, and immediately after picking up his book, I was really drawn in and immersed by his narrative. I think this is due to the fact that he is so close to his subjects when making these images, creating a really strong relationship. Especially when some of the scenes are quite confronting, his ability not to intervene directly is quite fascinating. I personally don't feel like he's taken advantage of these people, as they seem very comfortable around him and almost act like he's not even there, which really translates in his photos. And as you may have noticed, he shoots exclusively on 35mm black and white film, which is quite refreshing to see. I found it really allows you to focus on the subject, as there are no distractions in terms of different color schemes, and I find it really adds to the grunginess, which was an aesthetic that is quite common in Richards' work. Another project that I think is really worth sharing is probably his most personal and emotional body of work, titled Exploding into Life, which documents his first wife's battle with breast cancer. With her death almost inevitable, he and his wife decided to make this project to honor her courage and strength during the last few months of her life. According to his website, this project is a highly personal inquiry into what it means to be alive, to face an uncertain future, and to accept death. So there are some strong metaphorical and philosophical elements present in this book, which always adds another layer of depth, I believe. These intense images show what a cancer sufferer faces and may also offer some form of support to those who are going through a similar fight or have gone through one previously. As an audience, we are also shown what it's like to go through such treatment and how it can impact an individual and their family. So this project does somewhat differ from his previous body of work, but I still think it shares a similar feel. Once again, he's presenting these really confronting scenes, but shooting them in a really humanistic kind of way, which I believe is a trademark of his work. It's definitely one of my favorite projects of all time, and I would highly suggest checking it out either online or through the physical copy. So that was the work of Eugene Richards, and now on to the next photographer, Gordon Parks. So Gordon Parks is no doubt one of the most well-known and respected African-American photographers of all time. Often known for his work around the civil rights movement, poverty, and segregation in America, his work provides a historical record of the struggles African Americans faced in the 20th century. Born into a life of disadvantage, Parks found photography at age 25 and began freelancing as a portrait photographer and also working for a few local newspapers. His newfound passion for documentary and fashion work attributed to his storytelling ability, which I believe shaped his work in the years to come. Through these experiences, he was eventually commissioned by the federal government to portray the conditions of rural poverty through a program called Farm Security Administrations. It was here that Parks was introduced to a variety of different mentors, one of them being Roy Stryker, an American economist and photographer in his own right. This program also hired the likes of Walker Evans and Dorothy Lange, who all shared the same intention of documenting the misery in post-depression America. Eventually, however, the program was disbanded, which led Parks onto other projects like working for Vogue, for example. In 1948, he became the first African-American staff photographer at Life magazine, creating a number of different photo essays on community issues. So for the next 20 years, Parks documented the injustices and the impacts of Jim Crow laws on African-American families, producing a number of photo books and exhibitions as well. One of these being A Harlem Family, which follows the lives of the Fontel family and their 8 children. In 1967, at a time of civil unrest and uprising, Parks was commissioned by Life magazine to show what may be causing the anger to his predominantly white audience. This essay was a clear demonstration that this family, like many others in New York, were living in insufferable poverty and aimed to raise awareness to the issues these people were facing. In his complimentary essay, Parks wrote, "My whole purpose was to bring to the people of the United States an inner look at the thing that brings chaos in the summer. I wanted to show what it was like, the real, vivid horror of it, and the dignity of people who manage somehow to live with it." These emotional and powerful pictures are a true testament to the work of Parks and his ability to honestly portray some of the struggles he once faced. Out of all the things I admire in Parks' work, I think his strong connection with his subjects when he's making these sort of confronting projects really inspires me, as it's such an important part of documentary photography. It's so clear that Parks felt an obligation to share these horrific struggles in order to benefit this family and all African American people. So that was the work of Gordon Parks, and now onto the next photographer, which is pretty different, and that is Dennis Stock. So Dennis Stock was an American photojournalist based out of New York City, also in the mid-20th century. He was most known for his work documenting the rise of Hollywood and the jazz scene in America, capturing iconic portraits of James Dean, Billie Holiday, and Duke Ellington, just to name a few. He was also a member of Magnum Photos for most of his professional career, often making projects focusing on human behaviour and later shifting into the natural landscape. But what really blew me away with Stock's work was his behind-the-scenes photography on various film sets, in particular the 1968 film Planet of the Apes. These photos are probably the most absurd collection of images I've ever come across, which is what makes them so interesting. In the pre-CGI days, as you can see, the use of prosthetics was far more prominent than they are today, which is really cool to see and look back on. His images are quite comical, which I'm not sure was intentional, especially in some of these photos where the actors are in real-world locations, decked out in their costumes. Once again, shooting on black and white film, these photos have such nice quality to them, and also work well with the post-apocalyptic feel of the movie. 13 years prior to this, he also shot in a similar way on the cult classic Rebel Without a Cause, starring James Dean. These photos are more true to BTS photography, but I still think they are quite iconic considering the impact this film had. It was also one of the final films before the death of James Dean, who was a frequent collaborator with Stock on a separate project. Once again, these photos show the intimate relationships between actors and crew, documenting the off-camera moments which the audience rarely sees. Dennis Stock has unfortunately passed away since then, but in 2015 there was a movie released titled Life, recounting his relationship with James Dean, and he's played by Robert Pattinson, which is pretty cool. It did receive some pretty mixed reviews, but if you are interested in the life of these two men, as well as the golden age of Hollywood, then it might be worth checking out. So looking back on both of these projects, it's really piqued my interest in behind-the-scenes photography, and it's personally something I would like to explore more in the future. So I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, then please consider subscribing. And as I said at the start of this video, if there are any photographies you would like me to cover in a future video, then definitely leave a comment down below. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.